So if a veteran comes to you today and says, well, I think I have sleep apnea, I've never been, officially diagnosed, what is your advice to them? How can they make sure that they can benefit from the current criteria?
What I would tell them is to get an intent to file form and get it in.
Okay. What is the intent to file form and what makes it so powerful?
I always struggle to remember the numerical labels, but I think it's form 0996. But regardless of the numerical label for the form, it's called an intent to file. And what that does is it acts as a placeholder for a claim. So you file the intent to file form, and then you have a 1-year window, a 365-day window in which to file the actual claim. So say that you think you've got sleep apnea, but you haven't had a chance to get a formal diagnosis. You've been told you've got to get a sleep apnea test overnight at a sleep lab, and it'll take months to get scheduled and all the usual stuff. You file the intent form, and that essentially says, okay, VA, when the claim is filed, as long as it's filed within a year, it has the effective date of this intent to file. So if you file 364 days later, but you filed today, your claim under VA rules is effective today.
Welcome to the Victory Over VA podcast, a podcast about empowering veterans to overcome denied disability claims. Each week, we deliver critical insights to help you understand the disability process, veterans' benefits, and how to take control of your legal rights. Now here's your host, Attorney Francis Jackson.
Welcome to Victory Over VA. If you're a veteran struggling with the VA's disability system, or just want to make sure you're getting the benefits you've earned, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit subscribe so that you never miss an update that could change your life. I'm Kristian Terison, here with renowned veterans disability attorney Francis Jackson of Jackson and MacNichol. Jack has dedicated his career to helping veterans like you win the benefits you deserve, recovering millions of dollars for thousands of heroes. This podcast isn't just for veterans navigating the system, though. It's for their families, their friends, and anyone else who wants to stand shoulder to shoulder with those who've served. So stick around, because we're here to make sure you get the support you need.
So today's show is about the ticking time bomb that's waiting for veterans with unfiled sleep apnea claims.
With that dramatic opening, I guess most veterans have no idea that there's a deadline looming on the sleep apnea claims. Can you paint a picture of sort of what's at stake?
Sure. The VA is proposing a change in the way they rate the benefits available for sleep apnea claims. What the current system does is to essentially split the eligibility for benefits based on whether or not the claim is severe enough that the sleep apnea requires the use of a CPAP or BiPAP breathing device. If it does require that, then essentially the veteran gets an automatic 50% rating. If it doesn't, then you get the low rating. But what the VA is proposing to do is to change the way the rating system works so that the VA, rather than looking at whether the severity is enough to require CPAP or BiPAP, would instead look at the downrange, if you will, results after treatment. So if a person is treating with CPAP or BiPAP and as a result has relatively minimal symptoms, doesn't have a lot of daytime sleepiness, for example, then the VA could rate them as low as 10% or even a non-compensable 0%, even though they're using CPAP.
So what is the VA's justification for this change and the reason behind it?
Well, the ostensible reason is to bring the VA system in line with current medical thinking. There are those who would cynically suggest that perhaps it's also intended to bring the VA's budget more in line with the available funds.
So there's a lot of confusion out there right now about whether and when these changes will become final. So what's the legal status as of right now?
The legal status as of right now is completely up in the air. The way this works, the VA has proposed a change. They've put it out for comment. Technically, before they can implement it, they have to review the comments and finalize the regulation. But they can do that in a relatively speedy manner, 60 days, sometimes more, but that's not long in the life of a VA claim. So what really is going on here is that for a veteran who hasn't yet filed a claim, there is potentially a likelihood that the window for filing an effective claim at the 50% level could close quite quickly.
So let's talk a little bit about, I guess, the specifics of who this would apply to. So walking through, what about a veteran who's been diagnosed with sleep apnea, maybe is getting some treatment, but has never filed a claim for it?
Well, that's one of the groups of people who should be rushing out to file a claim.
And what do they get for rushing out and filing?
Well,
What's the rationale?
the trick is, if you file in a period where a regulation is in effect, under the court's analysis of the way VA regulations are to be applied, you can get either application of the current regulation regarding benefits when you file, or if there's a change, you can get the benefit of a new regulation that is more beneficial. But in this instance, what we're looking at is the potential for a new regulation that is much less beneficial.
Sure.
So in order to get within that, you have to file before that regulation is withdrawn or replaced.
Okay. And so for a veteran who's filed a sleep apnea claim and been denied, the analysis really wouldn't change? They've got their foot in the door, so to speak?
Well, sometimes. It depends on whether they continuously process that claim. So, say for example, you filed a claim a year ago, you got an unfavorable decision, your appeal period of 1 year expires next month. If you appeal within that appeal period, then you're still protected. You're under the old regulation.
Okay.
If you fail to file within that 1 year period and wait and refile, potentially by the time you refiled, that regulation that currently calls for an automatic 50% based on use of CPAP will be gone, and you might end up with, even though you're using CPAP, a rating of, say, 10%.
Gotcha. Now, I know from my own work, a lot of veterans often don't realize or think that their sleep apnea could even be service-connected. Can you talk a little bit about some of the most common rationales for service connection for sleep apnea?
Sure. There are actually several, but the most obvious one is what we call direct service connection. So, for example, if you have someone who has a history of heavy snoring while they were in the service, we had one fellow one time who they moved his bunk in basic training because he snored so badly. And snoring is not necessarily a guarantee that you have sleep apnea, but it is very likely to be one of the symptoms that is present when you have sleep apnea. So if you have heavy snoring, it is quite likely that you also have sleep apnea. So that's direct service connection. You show that something happened in service that makes it extremely likely that you had sleep apnea at that level or at that time. Indirectly, you can come at it some other ways. Say, for example, you have PTSD. One of the problems with PTSD is what's called hyperarousal, and one of the things it can do is to interfere with your sleep and cause you to stop breathing during sleep, which is basically what sleep apnea is about. So it can be the result of having service-connected PTSD, even if the sleep apnea itself is secondary to the PTSD rather than being directly connected to service. It can also get there some other ways. There are TBI conditions where part of the brain damage affects how the body processes the autonomic system during sleep and can lead to sleep apnea. There are some medications that can be prescribed, particularly for mental health, that can cause sleep apnea. So there are lots of ways to get there, even if it's not intuitively obvious that sleep apnea is in fact connected to service.
Okay. For those veterans who are already at 50%, they have a service connection for their sleep apnea, they're using a CPAP or BiPAP, I think is the other. Are they safe in their current ratings, or is there a way that could be taken away?
Well, it's like every other lawyer answer, maybe. The way it works, it is unlikely that the VA is going to go in and suddenly review everybody with sleep apnea if the regulation changes. But what happens is if you make a claim, say for a higher rating or for something that implicates your combined rating, like you apply for total disability based on individual unemployability, often called TDIU or IU. The VA in that instance is going to look at your total medical picture, and one of the things that could happen is that they could reduce your rating that's given for the sleep apnea itself. That's a possibility. There are some protective rules about rating reductions. Generally speaking, if you've had a rating for 5 years, the VA has to get medical evidence that there's what they call sustained improvement. If you've had the rating for 10 years, you have some protection against it being severed, but it can be lowered. If you've had the rating for 20 years or more, there are some rules that suggest the VA probably shouldn't be able to reduce it. It doesn't become impossible at that level, but it's very unlikely. And finally, if you're at TDIU, then again, generally you're protected against reduction. And there are, I'm giving a very quick overview of some fairly complex regulations, but those are the high points.
Not a legal consult.
Those are the high points.
So if a veteran comes to you today and says, well, I think I have sleep apnea, I've never been, officially diagnosed, what is your advice to them? How can they make sure that they can benefit from the current criteria?
What I would tell them is to get an intent to file form and get it in.
Okay. What is the intent to file form and what makes it so powerful?
I always struggle to remember the numerical labels, but I think it's form 0996. But regardless of the numerical label for the form, it's called an intent to file. And what that does is it acts as a placeholder for a claim. So you file the intent to file form, and then you have a 1-year window, a 365-day window in which to file the actual claim. So say that you think you've got sleep apnea, but you haven't had a chance to get a formal diagnosis. You've been told you've got to get a sleep apnea test overnight at a sleep lab, and it'll take months to get scheduled and all the usual stuff. You file the intent form, and that essentially says, okay, VA, when the claim is filed, as long as it's filed within a year, it has the effective date of this intent to file. So if you file 364 days later, but you filed today, your claim under VA rules is effective today.
Got you. So it really is that foot in the door is the intent to file, and then you have time to marshal the evidence, go and get your diagnosis,
That's right.
what have you. I know a lot of places there's a 6-month wait, even longer sometimes, to get a sleep study or other diagnostic testing for sleep apnea.
That's right. In most areas of the country, there are long delays for that kind of stuff.
Right. So I know from experience the VA loves to deny sleep apnea claims on Nexus grounds. So, as we've talked about in other episodes, that's the connection between military service and the claimed condition.
Right.
In this case, sleep apnea. We go into much greater detail in other podcast episodes if you have questions about the concept of the medical nexus. But what would strong nexus evidence look like for a veteran who's doing a sleep apnea claim? You mentioned anything about, snoring in service can be helpful.
Well, technically, you're looking for a medical nexus. So what you want is a letter or a report from a physician or a nurse practitioner or nurse saying, Mr. Jones has sleep apnea. His sleep apnea is connected to his service by, and an explanation of what the by is.
Gotcha. So if you had a dozen buddy statements saying you snored at 100 decibels and your nickname was the train, that still wouldn't rise to the level required for that medical nexus.
That's right. That's still not a medical nexus. Now, it is likely that if you had that evidence, you could find a physician who would give you a sleep study, diagnose you, and say, yeah, on these facts, given these reports show that you snored heavily during service, I can safely say that your sleep apnea relates back to and was present during your time in service. But you still need that medical piece.
Another thing that I've encountered with some of our clients is that they're embarrassed to claim sleep apnea. It's not a real service-connected condition like a physical wound or something. How do you respond to those veterans?
Well, there is no perfect response to that. Let me just be frank. I was recently talking to a Vietnam veteran who has a bad back, and he was in multiple helicopter crashes in Vietnam. But he's never claimed service connection for his back. He has for other things, but not for his back, because he says, well, I can't say for sure that's what it came from. Then that's his choice. But the reality is that the VA compensation system is intended, it is set up specifically to compensate people for all of the effects of having served in the military, not just the obvious ones like a gunshot wound. So what I always tell people is that it's your choice whether to claim any particular condition. If you don't feel that it justifies being claimed and getting compensation, that's perfectly up to you. It's your choice. But the system is intended specifically to compensate you for all of those things, not just obvious things like gunshot wounds or injuries in a helicopter crash, for example.
All right. On that note, that's our episode for today. Please be sure to like and subscribe and join us again next week.
We hope to see you then.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Victory Over VA podcast. Make sure to visit our website, veteransbenefits.com/podcast, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Spotify, or via RSS, so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. If you like this show, you might want to check out our free consultation to see how we can help you with your denied claim. Simply go to veteransbenefits.com and fill out the form. You fought for us. Now let us fight for you. And be sure to tune in next week for our next episode.